I'm with Jonathan Croft from Kingdom Faith Church in London, and we're here in Jerusalem. Jonathan, why are you in Israel at this time?
I love being in Israel, that's first, but I'm also here for a directors meeting with International Christian Embassy. I'm part of the UK board, and so I'm here representing the UK at the ICEJ event.
Now, you were here in February. Was that the first time you'd been here since the October the 7th terrorist attack?
Yes, I was here for a leaders' conference, and it was the first time I was back, yes.
And was it important to actually come here?
I felt it was very, very important to be here. We managed to go around the old city, and I've been here when it's been really busy, and to see the shops empty and just seeing the people there to support them was important for me and the people that I brought over from the UK.
It must have been quite a shock and surprise to see Israel so empty when usually it's really hustle and bustle.
Yeah, it was a shock actually, going down Jaffa Street, going round the old city, going to the Western Wall. It was shocking to see how quiet it was and actually how many shops and cafes were closed. And even the Garden Tomb was closed because I wanted to take a few people there to see the Garden Tomb, but it was closed. It was a Monday, but it was closed, which I was shocked by.
Did you have the opportunity to go down to the Gaza border communities to see the demonstration and things that had happened down there?
Yeah, on the leaders conference, they took a couple of coaches down to the border. And it was the Novi site. We went there and we went to the car cemetery. I'd seen the 43-minute video that was shown to the press. And driving down the road where I know there was a lot of massacre, where the Palestinians on October the 7th just shot at cars, murdered people along that road, around that site. It was very, very moving. And more so personally because I'd seen the video. And the video was shocking, and just to be driving and standing in areas where the atrocities took place, it was very moving.
You went to the Nova Festival, you see all the posters of all the people. Was it quite a fitting tribute to those people that some of them have been killed, but also some of them are still in Gaza as well?
I think it was a very fitting tribute. I think it's done very sensitively, very moving. Some of the stories, even the dustbin, the yellow dustbin where they were hiding, it's still there. And knowing what took place on that site, hearing the stories with a photograph and a little bit about each person, it was very, very moving.
It makes it very individual as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, because you could identify with some of the young people, even though I'm not as young now. I can still call myself a young person, but I'm not as young as those people who unfortunately lost their lives on October the 7th.
And that's a sad thing because it was a music festival as well. A lot of young people were there and a lot of young people actually lost their life.
Yeah, it was a youth event. The amount of 19, 20, 21-year-olds that lost their life. And again, they put their age, their photograph and age, what they did and why they were at the event. And some actually were just to meet friends. It wasn't the music festival that they were actually going to. They were meeting friends, but unfortunately they lost their life as a result of what the Gazans did on that day.
You went to the car cemetery. What did you see there?
Again, it's very moving, and because you see bullet marks in the cars, you see sometimes blood still on the window screens. You see the bullet marks in window screens and side doors. You see glass shattered. And because I saw that video, that 43 video, I know what they did, and they just shot indiscriminately into the cars. They didn't know whether they were old, young, baby. They just shot and fired at these cars, and to see that car cemetery just brought everything back, that people died in those vehicles, whether it was 1, 2, 3, 4 people, because they were fleeing for their life. But unfortunately the Palestinians just shot indiscriminately at these vehicles.
And there's a lot of cars there, isn't there? And there's some Hamas vehicles there as well, isn't there?
There was actually. When they came under attack from the police and things like that, they got destroyed. So there were a number of those vehicles still there with the guns in place, or not the actual guns, but the mechanisms for the guns to go on were in those vehicles and the Jeeps.
Now, I haven't seen the video, but you've seen the video. What sort of things are in that video?
It's very difficult to put into words, because you see grenades being thrown into bomb shelters, and you see people coming out of them and then falling and dying right before your very eyes, because this is what they're seeing. You see children not being killed not in the 43-minute video. You see them going into an area, and then you see a bomb going into that. You see a lot of blood on the floor of where they've done some atrocities, and there's a lot of blood. You see quite a lot of females where there's blood on clothing near the genital area. And also, one of the most horrific things is you actually see some of the Palestinians cutting off people's heads. And it's something that you're trying to get rid of in your mind, but it's something that we'll never, ever forget. I will never forget that. And that's why going down to the Gaza border, that brought all of those things back, because it happened in that area, these atrocities. And, you know, it wasn't a sharp implement that they cut that person's head off. Yeah. It was a guy that I saw, and it was videoed. Yeah. They videoed it. Yeah. You know, there's this one gentleman being videoed by his friends, and literally just hacking.
In one sense, Hamas actually collected their own evidence of their own crimes.
They did. I mean, all this 43-minute video was captured, majority of it, from their own cameras. There was some on CCTV, but the majority, they recorded it themselves. There was one gentleman sort of saying, you know, on the phone, saying to his dad, I killed 10. I raped, I killed. And his dad back in Gaza was, praise Allah, praise Allah. You know, this is what you're seeing, because they recorded it in themselves. Yeah. And it was like they glorified in death. And it was shocking to see, but I am very glad that I did see it. It was actually in the embassy in London that I got invited to go and see it there. And it was one of those things that you don't want to see it, but you need to.
So you went down to the Gaza border communities. Did you get to meet some of the people that were caught up in the terrorist attack and hear their stories?
Yeah, again, when we finished at the cemetery, Car Cemetery, we went into an area where there was a couple of people from the kibbutz, Beri, and we heard about a woman who was actually meant to be on the kibbutz that night on the Friday, and she just sort of said, I've got to get out, and so she actually left, and she slept in Tel Aviv, so her life was saved. But unfortunately, her ex-husband, he died in the assault, and in that particular kibbutz, I think there was over 60 people massacred. And just hearing her story that was so real, so tangible, she can't actually go back to that kibbutz at the moment because it was so damaged. And so they're in another kibbutzim for a season, and they believe that there'll probably be only 60% that will return, 40% won't.
Because they won't want to.
They won't want to, because they're afraid that it might happen again if they get the chance to do it.
Yeah. Now, you're a church that supports Israel. Why is that important?
I believe that, you know, God is a covenant-keeping God. I believe he promised something to Abraham, and that covenant that God has kept with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I believe as Christians that we need to understand that, you know, God keeps his promises. And so as a church based in London, we firmly believe that we need to be strong and support Israel, the Jewish people, the prophetic words that God spoke over this land and over its people. And we know that the end story, it's all going to happen here. So for me, it's something that as a church, I'm dumbfounded how people can read Genesis through to Revelation and choose to ignore the God of Israel. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And, you know, even saying that Jesus is a Jew, they're very dismissive. And so therefore, as the church in the UK, and we're very proud to say, no, we're aligning with God concerning this nation.
Now, you obviously are in London, and you've had pro-Palestinian protesters in London. How has that been? Have you seen some of those?
Yeah, I've actually been on some of the anti-protest marches. And we're a little group, and the police are very, very careful what we do. They tell us not to move out of an area, and if we move out of an area, then they would arrest us, and they will tell us what and how aggressive we can be. I don't have a megaphone, but some other people have megaphones, and they're allowed to shout at the Palestinians, but the police are very, very careful how we do that. But there's a lot of hate. We do have politically now, we do have a two-tier police system. You have Christians who are getting arrested and for trivial things, whereas you have the Palestinians who can march, they can say anything, the language of hate, their aggression, they're masked up, so you can't see all of the face, yet the police don't do anything. And so therefore there is a real political football that is going on in the UK as well regarding the two-tier police system, and part of that is the Palestinians and how they police the Palestinian marches.
Is there a lot of anti-Semitism in London at the moment, and do you see this as a possibility where the anti-Semitism will become so bad that the Jews will want to come to Israel, which is part of the fulfillment of prophecy?
Yeah, I mean, the anti-Semitism has gone up leaps and bounds since October the 7th. I don't quite know the percentages, but speaking to the Jewish community, they are frightened. They are told in certain areas to hide the Jewishness, and so people don't wear kippah and other things in certain areas because they're told not to. They're told not to come into London sometimes on Saturdays, and to be honest, the Jewish folks in London don't want to come into central London on a Saturday because of the marches, and they're full of hate. And so there is a stirring within the Jewish community in the UK that potentially, with the anti-Semitism, with some of the laws, some of the hatred, that more and more people will make Aliyah and return to this nation. So I think it's beginning. I think across Europe's the same. There's a higher percentage of people moving from France back to here making Aliyah. And I think even though we've not seen the gates open in the UK, people are frightened, and speaking into the Jewish community and talking to them, going on marches with them, they're frightened, definitely frightened.
What is your prayer for Israel at this time?
For me, God tells us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And so that's something that we need to do. But also, I'm talking to a Christian audience. We need to pray that the fulfillment of the Gentiles will be fulfilled, so that the Jewish nation can have their eyes open to Jesus the Messiah. They need to be saved just like us Gentiles. And we know that the end of the story is that God will open their eyes and the Jewish nation will return to the Lord, because they will recognize Jesus as the Messiah. And so that's my prayer, is that more and more people will recognize Jesus as the Messiah. But we know that prophetically, let's pray for the fulfillment of the Gentiles, so that the next part of that prophecy can be fulfilled.
You're in London. What's your website address for people who might find themselves in London wanting to go to a good church?
It's kingdomfaith.com/London.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.